Hi everyone. Welcome to Sitheads Meditation Club. My name is John and I help organize this group. Sitheads is a sitting and social group for people interested in deep meditation practice. Everything we do is free and donation based. If you want to hang out with us, you can find us at sit-heads.com. Let me just introduce our wonderful guest, Mirabai Bush. I like to describe Mirabai as the Forrest Gump of the Western meditation world. Not in the sense that she's slow or anything like that. She certainly is not. But in the sense, you know how Forrest Gump showed up in every major event? There he is shaking hands with Richard Nixon. There he is, marching with Martin Luther King Jr. Right? He's always in the photo. At every major event in the world of meditation in the West in the second half of the 20th century, I think Mirabai was there. Mirabai is in the photo. Neem Karoli Baba's ashram in India, with Ram Dass, Daniel Goleman, Surya Das, Krishna Das, all these other luminaries. You will find one more luminary, Mirabai Bush. In Bodh Gaya, at the famous early Goenka retreat, where I believe Sharon Salzberg, Joseph Goldstein, and Jack Kornfield met each other, where Ram Dass and Danny Goleman were also there, Mirabai Bush was there. She was there in Barre, Massachusetts, helping Jack and Sharon and Joseph start the Insight Meditation Society. She was there at the University of Massachusetts as a young John Kabat-Zinn was cobbling together his mindfulness-based stress reduction. She founded an organization called the Center for Contemplative Mind in Society. She's the co-founder and later the executive director, which did, I believe, the first sort of workplace meditation and mindfulness programs in America. She later helped design the curriculum for Google's pioneering Search Inside Yourself mindfulness and contemplative program. She's kind of just done it all. She's one of the coolest people alive. And then here's some formal stuff. Her spiritual studies include 2 years in India with the great Neem Karoli Baba, the great 20th century saint. She has studied with the legendary S.N. Goenka personally, as well as the great Anagarika Munindra, Tibetan masters Kalu Rinpoche, Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche, Gelek Rinpoche, Sokni Rinpoche, one of my first teachers actually, and many others. Okay, I need to take a breath. That was a long introduction. Hey, Mirabai.
It's
Nice to see
almost
you. Is it weird having yourself be talked about like that while you're sitting there listening?
it's very strange, but I'll survive.
So we talked about this a little bit earlier today, but Mirabai has written a wonderful book. She co-authored it with Ram Dass called "Walking Each Other Home," and it's a book about dying. And almost every conversation I've had with Mirabai in the past few years, at some point we talk about dying or death. But she talks about it in a very sort of chill, cheery way. I called her a deadhead earlier. She always wants to talk about death. But and we'll talk about death in a second. But I was visiting you, Mirabai, in Massachusetts where you lived, and with my partner, and so Mirabai gave me this Buddha statue. She took this Buddha statue off a shelf and gave it to me. And immediately I had so much ego around this. I was like, this elder, right? This great spiritual elder is handing down to me this precious Buddha statue. She's bequeathing it to me. And then she's immediately like, do you want this? I'm gonna die eventually, so I'm trying to give away all my shit. And it was just just completely punctured any sense of holiness. She's just like, do you want this crap? Though I do still have and treasure that statue. But is it okay if we talk about death for a second, Mirabai?
Of course.
So I try really hard to be aware of the inevitability and the uncertain time of death. The fact that I could really die at any time, that this life is finite and I have no idea how finite. You know, the Buddha enjoins us to reflect in that way. And it is not working. Um, you know, when I speak to people who have really been in the presence of death, like friends of mine who had a serious illness from which they recovered, and friends of mine who, you know, who had terminal illnesses who didn't recover, but, you know, I spoke with them before, they were alive with the awareness of death in a way that I can see is so healthy and so wholesome and powerful and spiritual. Um, they were alive to the moment because of their awareness of death. And is there a way, really, for a person who's still relatively young, apparently relatively healthy? I'm also relatively happy, but that's not what I meant. Uh, is there a way for us to get a taste of that? Because it never feels real. It always feels like a little exercise I'm doing. You
Mm.
know, how do we tap into that? Those of us who aren't the nearness of our death isn't obvious.
Well, excuse me. The closest we come to it in this life is, and I've been there recently a number of times, is when a friend or family member or a loved one dies. And I've just been realizing that that is such a gift to the rest of us because in those moments, sometimes when you first hear it, or when you've been close to that person around the time of their death, um, there's a way in which the veil opens up. I've I've really experienced this recently, and it's disorienting, but it is such a deep uh, reminder, or you know, uh, that yeah, that we are going to die, and that when we do, we won't be here in this body anymore. It's so preposterous, but it's true. So that's one thing I want to say is when the opportunity arises, of course, it's always sad and confusing, but to be aware that this is also a gift to you of getting close to that mystery. Um, and then, of course, I mean, some traditions say you should bring death to mind every day, just in any way. Maybe you have poems about death, or maybe, or quotes from great teachers, or or one thing I've been doing is, well, when I started writing the book with Ramdas, which was in 20, I guess 17 or something, um, I we started talking and thinking about death all the time, and it took 2 years to write it. And before that, I mean, I had been, as you heard, with lots of teachers, and of course, I thought about it, but I had to really think about it when we were doing this book. So one thing that came to mind was, oh, after I die, I wonder if anyone will remember me. I for a while in the 90s, I led groups of women in different contexts, and we introduce ourselves by each woman saying her name, her mother's name, her grandmother's name, and as far back as she could go. And almost no one could go beyond their grandmothers. And I now have a grandchild and whom I adore. And I realized she's 13. So her Dahlia's daughter wouldn't even know my name if this continued to be true. And we know in this country there are a lot of reasons for it that have to do with immigration from lots of different places. That's part of it. But still, the human memory isn't that long. So I created a table, and I put pictures on it of of the few friends at that point who had died. And I just vowed, like they do in other cultures, Native Americans, many Asians, I visited them every day. I just walked past the table, and honored them. Since that time, the table got so crowded with pictures that I had to start another table. But I think bringing to mind people we've loved who have died, people we love who have died, can help remind us. There are meditations also, of course, which may feel like exercises, like all meditations. They don't always work, That's what we practice over and over again. Which reminds me of Norman Fisher is a great Zen teacher in California, and I were teaching this course that we developed for the Googlers, and so we did a full day teaching, and we did basic mindfulness, we did walking, we did some compassion practices. So the next day we gathered, which is a week later, I think. What shall we do? Well, let's just practice with them for start. Okay, so Norman sits down and said, all right, close your eyes and bring your awareness to your breath. One of these young nerdy engineers in the front row said, we learned that last week. I said,
What's the next thing?
We
What
forgot
else you
to
got?
we forgot to explain the nature of practice. But anyhow, practices don't always bring you into the full depth of being able to hold the reality of death, but they can really help. And one that Ram Dass and I would do during, particularly when we were working on this, he was dying. He was closer to dying than I was. He died a year after we finished. But it's like a body scan in a way, but you say the phrases like, I am not these eyes and what they see. And his meditation was always to bring yourself into loving awareness. And so we would say, I am not these eyes and what they see. I am loving awareness. I am not these ears and what they hear. I am loving awareness. And then, of course, you can go through your body. Is also, I am not these thoughts. I am loving awareness. I am not these emotions. So that can help you remember, who you are, who is not this body. And that's who's left after you leave your body behind. So those are some things to do.
Yeah, thank you. That's helpful. And I appreciate the reminder that you can't just snap your fingers and expect results from your meditation. That's just as true for sort of reflective meditations, like meditations on death, as it is for more technical, attentional gymnastics meditations.
Yes.
So I appreciate that reminder for sure. A couple other things I wanted to talk to you about, Mirabai, if we have time before we go to the Q&A. So one thing I want to talk to you about, it's a little bit off, it's a change of topic, but the days with Maharaji, back in the 70s, I recently reread Love Everyone, the book of stories about Maharaji, Neem Karoli Baba. It's a beautiful book. And one thing that's very obviously striking about it is just how casually everyone is talking about seemingly supernatural, psychic, consensus reality defying phenomena. And this is an area that normally doesn't interest me that much. partly because folks like the Buddha say things like don't worry about that all that much. So I've tried to listen, but there's something unique to me about just how everyone who told a story about Maharaji, from whoever, from Danny Goleman, an esteemed psychologist, to Ram Dass, to Larry Brilliant, the world famous medical doctor, just everyone, people that you don't normally think of as kooks, or who have certainly at least graduated from kookhood into, wearing a suit and tie and being respectable people, um, just talk very casually about, oh yeah, and then Maharaji obviously read my mind, and then all my chakras exploded, and I fell to the ground weeping, and I had to be carried away by his devotees while he threw apples at me or something. And I just I want to understand how that impacted you. Can you speak to how that impacted your spiritual practice, how that changed the way you think about spirituality, if at all, and what it meant to then move into a phase of your life in which Maharaji was no longer with you physically, and maybe those same miraculous occurrences weren't there right in front of you in the same way, and how that did or didn't affect you or your practice?
Well, that is a big question.
Yeah, sorry.
But it's so hard to talk about. But what I will say is that um, when I got to him, I was in the fourth year of my PhD. I'd grown up in New York. I was not. I mean, I never thought that I would be devoted to a holy man in India. Um, but but from the minute I met him, I had just been meditating for 3 months in Bodh Gaya with Goenka, so I was already in kind of an altered state. But he just expanded my understanding of what it can mean to be human. There was something, he was just, he was expansive, and it felt like, well, what he told us. We wanted directions when we came back to this country. We want to know everything we should do, and what he said was, love everyone, and serve everyone. And we thought, oh, that'll be easy. But he was just an embodiment of love. And so I never really got into the miracles part of what was going on. I accepted it, but it didn't seem important to me. What seemed important to me was that it was possible to be a being who really did love everyone. And by loving everyone, by loving us, by him loving me, I just felt like a lot of barriers dropped away, that that there were, life just seemed to hold many more possibilities than it did before I met him. And it partly came from the heart opening. I mean, that's it did come from that. And I felt my heart opening, and being much more able to love, because he loved us so much. It's not very, I mean, it's hard to say. We don't have much experience in the West or anywhere, I think, on the planet right now with saints. I grew up as a Catholic girl, so I always, honored the saints, but I never thought I'd actually meet one. But he'd gone beyond the restrictions that most of us carry. And I've been with a lot of other great teachers too, but he was in a different kind of category.
it almost sounds from the stories and from what you've said that he wasn't exactly a teacher. He didn't give you lessons really,
No,
right? Or I mean, I think Haridas Baba did that for some people at the time, gave technical instructions, but he didn't really teach you, right? He just sort
no,
of, yeah,
he just kind of was. I mean, later, the neuroscientists started talking about mirror neurons,
yeah.
that just by being with each other, we're changing each other, and all the time, all of us. But
Mm.
being with someone who was so expanded and generating so much love, it just, I used to feel sitting in front of him, I used to feel like my cells were rearranging themselves. Um, uh, yeah. And he didn't give us guidance for coming back, so we really had to figure that out.
Yeah.
Still,
You seem to
still.
have done an okay job. It's fun to read the back of the book where you get to read about all the various things that people did, all his devotees later, with the
I
rest
read,
of their lives,
yeah,
essentially.
yeah.
Very interesting.
Interesting, wide range,
Hmm.
wide range of all kinds of
The
things.
book again is called Love Everyone. It is well worth a read. It's a fascinating, fascinating book. And it's just incredible to hear about some of these people who are devotees who've gone on to do everything, all sorts of things that you could imagine. And I find it one of the things that I find really astonishing and such a testament to the power of what Maharaji was offering or emanating or embodying is that the fact that there were all these miracles, right? At least according to just so many eyewitnesses that it's wild. And I'm not a person who normally believes in that sort of thing, but you just read like testimony after testimony after testimony of all these things, him knowing things he couldn't know, say, hey, et cetera, et cetera. And yet that's not what stood out for you. What stood out for you was the quality of his presence and of his love, to the point where the miracles were the thing that felt mundane, it sounds like to you. They were the thing that were of relatively little importance.
Mhm. Mm,
Yeah,
yeah.
that's something. Um, so something that I thought was interesting about the Maharaji scene, the Western Maharaji scene, was the way that you would weave back and forth between bhakti and Buddhism. Because my understanding was that, uh, and Theravada Buddhism, the sort of more, by the book, some might even say austere
Mm,
Theravada Buddhism, and this really like vibrant, like sort of juicy, devotion drenched bhakti tradition where you sing these songs of love and holy devotion. And Maharaji, it's, if I remember correctly, would send people off to Goenka to go do Vipassana training, and people were always sort of bopping back and forth between the ashram and Goenka. And then you have people like Surya Das, who was a devotee of Maharaji, a bhakti, and is now a Buddhist Lama. Um, how did you all slip back and forth so comfortably? Because I would love to learn a lesson from that, of, where uh, you've had such an eclectic path and it doesn't feel like they've butted up against each other or caused problems for you or that you've rejected one for the other. It just seems like they all have a home in you. And without becoming a spiritual dilettante, how can one do that and explore different paths or find the ways in which paths are related or cousins to one another, even though they seem so different at first glance or even second glance?
mm. Well, uh, in my experience, all that time in meditation with Goenka and Munindra, um, gave me uh, the capacity to be much more fully in the moment, present, clear, mindful, all those things that happen when you sit for a while, um, than I had ever been. And and then and that was when I met Maharaji. I felt like that preparation had allowed me to appreciate the power of his love. Um, but or and um, yeah, the concentrated awareness, presence that comes from doing a lot or any Buddhist meditation um, allows me to be more in my heart, which is the essence of bhakti, opening your heart. And then, I mean, they're all about awakening through different paths, of course. And so um, that allowed me to be more in my heart. Also, there were times I remember when sitting and just sitting and watching my mind, and it was a very austere practice, and sometimes just like longing to hug someone,
Mm.
just to feel connection with other humans in a loving way, and so um, bhakti is all about that, is waking up through love and waking up through relationship. Um, and when when we um, when we designed that Google course, we called it, because they were the big search engine, we called it Search Inside Yourself. And so we started out like, okay, we're going to teach, we'll teach mindfulness, we'll teach uh, all the various Vipassana modes. But what we realized was that this is back in 2007, so it was kind of just beginning. And they were all young. They had been in front of their screens their whole lives. They were the first digital natives. And they were still in front of their screens all the time. And Google was moving into this time when they needed to work in teams, and they were not good at it because they had always been in front of their screens. They didn't. So what did they need? They needed self-awareness, but they also needed awareness of others. And so Danny Goleman was part of developing that course too. We finally called it uh, mindfulness-based emotional intelligence, because they needed to be able to be with, appreciate, understand, other humans, love other humans. Um, and so um, both, I mean, I'm sure you could go through a lifetime just doing Vipassana or just being on the bhakti path and awaken fully, completely. Yeah. But um, for many of us, it's been really helpful to have the practices and the awareness of both. And and I would also say that at different times in one's life, different practices are most helpful. So I had as you hear, I'd always done Vipassana and Bhakti, but uh, in the 80s, I was getting divorced, and it was my husband, we'd been together. Maharaji had married us. We'd been together through all kinds of things, and uh, and it was really traumatic. And I tried to sit silently and watch my breath. It was just so hard. And I went to Barry, and I'd sit and I'd walk. It was impossible. I went to Joseph and I said, Joseph, I can't do this. He said, Mirabai, Zen teachers would kill for this opportunity. So, but at that time, um, I was also teaching with Ramdas, and someone came to teach Aikido at a course we were doing, and just a kind of kitchen table Aikido thing. But I was something I'd never ever thought I'd do a martial art. I just never occurred to me. There was something happened when I watched him move. And then I started doing Aikido. I was living in Cambridge at the time. There was a great Japanese teacher there, Kanai Sensei. And it was so perfect for me at that time. I realized after 5 years of practicing that I had never on the mat had a thought about anything except what I was doing because I was so terrified. I mean, it's dangerous. So you have to really pay attention. And that was just what I needed. And I mean, I kept doing the other things, of course, but that really helped me through that time. And then after 5 years, I stopped doing it. But it was just such a teaching to me that at different times we need different practices to awaken in different ways.
Yeah. No, that makes a ton of sense. Thanks for that. And so I'm doing Tai Chi right now, which is not dangerous. You're really not in danger of getting thrown or anything. But I know what you're talking about when you add a movement component too, it
Yeah.
really, there's something about it that just brings you into the moment very powerfully, very easily almost. So there's a nice facet of that. I want to ask you one more quick thing, and then we'll move to Q&A. There's just something I've been meaning to ask you. Maybe we could do it quickly. My last question for you, Mirabai. This world that we're in now, in terms of the meditation landscape, the Dharma and spirituality landscape, at least in the West, is a landscape that you and your contemporaries really did a lot to shape. It's really your world in some ways. You, Kabat-Zinn, Joseph and Sharon and Jack, Goleman, Ram Dass, right? This world where, I feel like if I asked a bunch of people, 80% of them would be like, yeah, I have a meditation app on my phone, right? That is wild. Where there's a mindfulness program at Google. You did that. There are also mindfulness programs at military defense contractors. I wonder how you feel if you step back and look at this world that you and your friends so helped create. How do you feel about it? What do you see as the positives? What do you see as maybe the downsides or drawbacks or things that you would like to see change? And where do you think we go? Where's the next place that the world of meditation, mindfulness, contemplative practice, and spirituality goes in the West from here? I like how I was like, this will be a short question. And then it's like, okay. We can try and do sort of a speed round on this one, but I wonder what you think.
Well, what I've learned so far is we really don't know where it's going to go because we didn't know where it was going to come to this point for sure. And I mean, it is one of the truths of practice. You just keep practicing and then without being attached to the results, the Gita. And then and then you see what happens and then you correct course. But yeah, I mean, I think it's been wonderful that it's no longer a practice only for those few of us who had to go all the way to India and come back and practice in these kind of very precious retreat centers that we founded. But and that now it's not just available in lots of different contexts, but just there have been so many really, I think, brilliant teachers and practitioners who have, been able to frame it in language and culture that helps all different kinds of people be able to benefit from it. And that has been extraordinary. I've learned so much from it, um, from working with, in our higher education program, there were teachers adapting uh, not just the language, but the understanding of practice for many different groups of students of different kinds. The whole movement among um, Black Buddhist meditation teachers now around, seeing it in terms of liberation, I think, is brilliant. And uh, there are there are so many things. I mean, in working with the lawyers, with the judges who asked us to, if we could help them be non-judgmental, so that's good. And you know, lawyers who wondered, ask questions that make all of us think. You know, can I have compassion for the client on the other side of the case and still be a zealous advocate for my client? Um, did working with journalists who said, um, you know, they saw it as like the inner story, that they were realizing that there was a story they were following and reporting on all along. Anyhow, like just having these practices that existed for 2,500 years, but for me, seeing them like have a home in all these different parts of this culture that we're part of now, it's been, I just feel like I've learned so much. And so I hope that it continues. What I mean, the regrets, or, you know, it is true that in organizations, particularly businesses, um, that first of all, it's often brought in by management who wants to improve productivity. And so, as we know, doing practice with uh, instrumentally because you want to improve something or change something keeps it from happening. I mean, it keeps, of course, everybody can get a little less stress and a little quieter, but it can mask the real transformative potential uh, of the practices when it's framed that way and offered that way, and the, you know, and same on some of the apps, you know. So, but I just, and there's been a lot of criticism about it, you know. This is about you shouldn't take those practices into businesses or places like that. But
Make mindfulness.
yes, we actually did a program with the Army. It was really amazing, um, with caregivers in the Army. But I guess it's just inevitable part of when you are seeding something so widely that, you know, that it won't always, uh, you know, reach full potential. But I still think it was a good idea.
Mm. Yeah. Cool. Me too. Um, well, that's a nice place for us to wrap up this conversation, Mirabai. And are you all right if we open it up to Q&A?
Of course, yeah.
All right. And thanks so much for, it's always such a pleasure to spend time with you and hear what you have to say and hear what you think about things. So
I'm really
um,
happy to be with you too.
thanks,
But
Mirabai. Pretty fun. So, all right, Q&A time. Let's see. Uh, Idris, would you like to come up and ask your question?
Hi, Mirabai. Thanks for doing this.
I,
I really love how you said, when you instead of the people we loved, that died, you changed it people we love that died. I don't know. The questions about ghosts and spirits, I guess, is like, how do I any like communing with those, like, the people who've passed, like in the physical space, or like feeling like a presence or a way of like remembering them and connecting it, like you mentioned, with the practice of martial arts is like just like I don't know. I had an druid housemate who saw, you know, his ancestors all the time, and he seemed very happy conversing with them. That's my question.
But I'm not quite sure. Is your question, how do you do it? Or,
I guess, or yeah, I suppose, or if you have any thoughts on it, it could be theoretical. I thought I'd switch it to the practical, given
hmm,
the question guidelines.
yeah. Well, we don't really know what's happening on the other side. Um, but I have found that, you know, you can, especially if you do meditation practice, you know how to like quiet down and center and then like kind of bring into your awareness someone who has already died, and then just be with that person um, in that way, um, without the need for being physically together. Um, and I find that, you know, sometimes I'll just sit at my little table there and I'll bring somebody, maybe first look at their picture and then just call them in, you know, and sometimes it, you know, it feels very connected, very present. Of course, there are dreams also. I only, after Ramdas died, and you know, you can tell from what I'm saying, we were so close. And I just had one dream of him because he would always say, who would, uh, our teacher Maharaji would say, someone said, I'm afraid you're going to die. And he'd say, where could I go? So Ram does like to say that too. Where could I go? So anyhow, I had one dream, and in it we were sitting in a circle, and like we were about to teach some kind of group or workshop or something, you know. And so there were about 20 people sitting in a circle, and we were waiting for someone, and there was one person between me and Ramdas, and so I knew he was there, so I kind of leaned back a little, you know, and I reached around the other person and I touched Ramdas's arm. I just got filled with just warmth and light and happiness. It was amazing. And then he leaned back and he looked at me and he said, I'm here. And that was the end of the dream. And that's the only dream I've had of him. But, you know, they're here. I do, we don't know in what way, but I'm here.
That was beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you, Idris. Thank you, Mirabai. Shalini, would you like to ask your question?
Yes, please. Hi, Mirabai. So lovely to see you. I have so many questions, and thank you so much for just everything you've been sharing. And I think you almost answered my question. I was gonna ask, how do Western practitioners bring in bhakti into a practice? I mean, I feel that when I'm with you, with teachers like Joseph Goldstein, and being an academic and a researcher, but also a teacher, I tend to get too much in my mind, and then being in your presence and being, and you know, some of the teachers, but it really requires that letting go of. But it doesn't. I mean, for me, it doesn't come naturally. Even though I'm from India, it's not that natural to just let go of my analytical mind, even in mindfulness, and to incorporate that surrender. You know, that idea of surrendering to a teacher. What would that look like in our Western world?
Yeah, well, it's good you brought up that word surrender. That was, I mean, the idea of surrendering is definitely, particularly for women, in when we encountered this path, it's difficult. But it's not surrendering in the sense of giving anything up or giving over to someone, but rather it's just like letting go of what's keeping you from being fully present and fully in your heart. So, but kirtan
Mm.
is chanting. You know that, but um, but it's not my main practice, but God, it's so helpful sometimes in terms of just, allowing emotion to awaken you, and beauty, and sound, all of that. Just chanting can really be wonderful. And especially if, me too, like have your very active mind. And so if you're chanting and you can't really have very interesting thoughts if you're actually really chanting. So, and the resonance of the sound, of course, those aren't just words. And so that takes you to a different vibrational place. And yeah, it helps.
Thanks, Shalini. Thanks, Mirabai. All right. Caroline, would you like to ask your question?
Sure, thank you. Hi, Mirabai. Thank you so much for coming back and for chatting with us. I forgot to wear my Seva Foundation t-shirt tonight. I was just curious to know, you've talked about a lot of different practices that you have done throughout the years, and I'm just curious what your current practice or practices look like these days.
Well, I meditate on Zoom 3 mornings a week. And John Daly was on earlier. I don't know if he's still on, but he's part of that group. And when I saw tonight, I felt like I kind of I don't know, out on the town doing something glamorous because we were meditating online at night. Funny. But so I I do Vipassana practice. I also do kirtan chanting, and if you like that, Krishnadas, who was with us with Maharaji, who's a great leader of kirtan, he has a thing called hanging out with KD or something, Thursday nights on YouTube. It's really fun, informal and beautiful. And I do a lot of walking, and particularly during COVID when all the gyms closed and everything. And when I walk, I usually do a mantra while I'm walking. And I do yoga. I didn't mention that before. I don't do martial arts anymore. I'm about to be 84. So I think, even though they say it's a lifetime practice, I don't know whose lifetime, but I do yoga, and I've always done yoga, and it's just amazing. Like that. I'm probably forgetting, I read a lot. And yeah, I sometimes I have a little altar table of inspiration with a picture of Maharaji on it and some other things, the Buddha, and I just sit there and reflect. And also, I want to say, I just finished the first draft of this memoir, and you can hear from John, like there's a lot of stories to put in it, so it wasn't hard. But really, I thought I want to get it all down because I have a granddaughter. I want to pass it on, But as I started doing it, what I realized is it is a great practice at at any time in life, because however old you are, you've already had a lot of experience. And to just look back on it and see how it looks now, and, you know, and to be really honest, what I realized was I'd saved all kinds of stuff, letters and journals and so on. And that I had remembered things not exactly as they happened, it turned out. I told myself my narrative, but it was like I had, used things so they fit into the storyline without being conscious of that at all. And so it's been very helpful to look back and try to be really honest with, what's happened in my life and what I learned from it and where I, made mistakes. And that's a good practice. So that's some of it. I'm in well, it's my third marriage, but it's been for 40 years now. And that's a practice. So there you are. Keeps me busy.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Caroline. Thanks, Mirabai.
Mm.
Chappelle, would you like to ask your question?
Yeah, thanks, John. Hey, Mirabai, thank you for coming.
Glad to see you.
Yeah, good seeing you. In terms of the three characteristics, so like a lay person practicing in daily life, would you recommend one of the characteristics for a yogi to look at, like for a lay person?
Say, what do you mean by characteristics?
The three characteristics of impermanence and dukkha.
Oh, mm-hmm. And as a lay person, how do you look at those? Or
yeah, I'm wondering if maybe if you recommend leaning into looking at one of them, or would you say it's like more useful to like have it like fair game, like if you see impermanence, see that, if you see anatta, see dukkha.
Well, they're all so interpenetrated that it's hard to look at one without the others. And so, I just think being aware of impermanence really helpful, particularly as well in every way, and at the same time, awareness of interconnection. And so that seems to be so underdeveloped, shall I say, in this culture at this time, that we are all interconnected. We all are each other. And it just, sometimes I think there seem to be people, particularly people you see in public life, who don't seem to have any awareness of that. And I think that must be so sad, that I find the more I become aware of how connected we are, the happier I get, and yeah. So I taught the practice of just like me. Did we do it on here one time? Maybe. But anyhow, it's a practice where you discover, well, you remind yourself that this person suffers just like me. This person has struggled just like me. This person has been sad just like me. This person. That's so powerful. And yeah, that's the practice of opening and liberating love. And impermanence, as I get older, is more and more, relevant. It seems like it's all because it it's both the, it gets me through all kinds of situations I find myself in that, like, difficult things will pass, and not to hold on to the way I want things to be, because it's all changing all the time. And to really hold an appreciation for that, you hardly need anything else. I mean, you need discriminating wisdom and but I mean, it's a lifetime's work to focus on those and to learn from them and learn from ourselves, trying to hold those and go through it. Does that help? Yeah. And going through it in life off the cushion, out of the monastery, with all that we're dealing with, it's the most powerful teacher course, and so yeah, it's a blessing, although it doesn't always look that way. Yeah.
Thanks so much.
Thanks, Chappelle. Thanks, Mirabai. Someone asked me to ask a question on their behalf. So may you please ask Mirabai if there is a connection between spirituality and creativity? So there's the question.
Yeah, good question. I mean, my experience is that, yeah, there is, because the more you can see things as they are, the better you can express things as you see them, and the more truth will be in whatever it is you make or do. And that's what makes, I think that's what creativity is about, is recognizing that within the universal truths of our lives, that each of us sees it and understands it and knows it and lives it in a slightly different way. And that being able to express that in whatever form is the creative act. And I mean, I used to think that creativity, like, that you kind of like made something happen, and I think it was actually back in the day, in the psychedelic era, which is upon us again, but was I, I just realized that, oh no, it's not like you're making something up. You're seeing things as they are, and then you can express them in different ways, so you can share them with others. But it was really more about seeing and knowing, and then expressing, and and certainly practice helps you, if nothing else, to see things as they are. So, and also I find in practice it gives you a kind of confidence, not unrealistic that you can do anything, but a kind of at home with yourself, so that you feel confident in putting something creative out for others to see. You feel good about that. I found that practice really helped me with that.
Thanks, Mirabai. I hope that was helpful to whoever asked the question. They actually responded and said thank you. Shalini, would you like to ask your follow-up question?
Absolutely. Thank you, John. Mirabai, I was wondering if there's an opportunity to practice with the OG teachers, like in a sangha with the bhakti, to experience the bhakti. And so I think you already did mention Krishna Das, but that's the singing. But is there like actually a sangha where we can Like I feel there's like this transmission. I really believe in that happens when we are able to spend more time with you all.
Well, you know, we've been doing this once a year on Maui, and which may they be okay. But of course, it's limited. You know, it's once a year, and it's not everybody can get to Maui, and only like 400 people come. But we've been acting it out with Jack Cornfield and Trudy and Joseph sometimes, and Sharon's done it, and then also Ram Dass and Krishna Das and mixes of people. And we've been exploring it a lot, you know, how those things work together. Joseph said recently, he said, well, how do they come together? And he just was quiet for a while, and he said, I've got it. Love your breath. So that was good. But anyhow, yeah, let's talk about that some more, because we are actually trying to figure out how to go forward with all of this. So
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Shalini. Thanks, Mirabai. So we are looking pretty perfect in terms of timing. I don't see other questions, so I think it's a nice time to wrap up, if that's all right with you, Mirabai.
it's good with me.
Is there anything that you want to say before we wrap up?
I don't know. I think on the subject of we're all interconnected, I just got in the mail copies of Walking Each Other Home in Korean and Chinese, and before that in Russian. So they're not only 3 languages I don't know, but they're 3 alphabets I can't read. But there are people in those places who could be with us tonight, obviously, you know. So that makes me happy to know.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And I really recommend the book. Also, it's not the only book Mirabai has written. Here's a book that I think you know that I have this, Mirabai, but I found this just on like a table, you know, in Union Square. Someone was just selling books, you know, off a folding table in Union Square in Manhattan. And I had no idea who you were. I'd never heard your name, but I had read Be Here Now. And so I grabbed this book. And I can't get over how much I love this photo, by the way. It's like such a great photo of both of you that I almost can't stand it.
He always thought it was really dorky. And
I love it. That's why I like it. I love Ram Dass and his little like cable knit sweater with the collared shirt. It's just very funny. I'm so used to him with the beads and the beard, and it's just it rules. So Mirabai's written some other great books. This is a wonderful book, Compassion in Action. And that's all I got. Mirabai, I'm so grateful to you for coming and joining us for a 3rd time. And it's always just like it always makes me really happy to get to spend time with you. So thank you.
Me too. Thank you. This is really fun. And you draw such good people to you. That makes it even more fun.
What did you say, Mirabai?
You draw such great people. I don't mean me. I mean everybody else who's here, which is really nice. Yeah.
We're, you know, we've all sort of co-created this community, and it's become a really lovely one that brings me a lot of joy and happiness. So I'm grateful for it as well. So thank you, everybody. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your attention. Thank you for your practice. And I hope to see you all soon. Good night, everybody.
Mhm.